Let's start by deleting this light with X. I'm going to scale up the cube by 4 times by pressing S, then 4 on the numpad. Then I'm going to move it up by also 4 units, pressing G, Z and 4 on the keyboard, so it lays perfectly on the grid. I like enabling the move gizmo right off the bat, so I can move things around easier. Let's jump into the camera with numpad 0, then on the side panel change the X rotation to 63 and the Z axis to 45. This will give us a great isometric view on the scene. Change the camera's focal length to 240 for now, because it almost looks like an orthographic view, and if you lock your camera to the viewport, you can zoom out with the mouse wheel just like this. Let's change the type to orthographic and also the scale to 19 or whatever number which works for you. Now I'm going to set the resolution which I like, then I try to fit this box in the middle. If it's all set, disable the camera to viewport option. I like setting up the camera early in the process. Alright, tap into edit mode and delete these faces. Then I'm going to give this a solidify modifier to create the walls easily. Make sure to check the even thickness option to get perfect shapes, then apply the modifier. Shift A and add in a new cube. I will shape this cube into the wooden planks for the floor, only using some modifiers. By the way, I use X-ray and wireframe mode a lot. Through the modeling process, you can enable the X-ray right here and the wireframe mode right there. I have them both on shortcuts, so I can access them more quickly. I also like to use the cavity shading because it highlights all the edges and gives me a better visualization over my scene. So let's get back to our cube and start scaling it down until we get a single plank. And with the use of the snap tool, we can easily snap it to the corner of the room. Let's start moving it along one of the axes, and by holding down Ctrl, hover over the corner and it will automatically snap to that single vertex. Let's scale it down on the Z axis as well, then move it close to the floor. I created another duplicate with Shift D, and with the middle mouse button you can lock its movement on a single axis. Select both the planks and duplicate them again using Shift D and the middle mouse button to move them on the X axis. Select all the planks, then press Ctrl J to join them together. I'm going to scale it down a little bit more to fit it into the room. For that I will use a small trick. Go into edit mode, select this face, then press Shift S and select cursor to select it. Then change the pivot point to the 3D cursor. From now on you can easily scale it down on the X axis by pressing S then X, while the other end of the planks stays at the same place. Press Ctrl A and select Scale to apply all the scaling we did before. Create another row of planks, change back the pivot point and rotate them by 180 degrees on the Z axis by pressing R, Z and typing in 180. Then I move it close to the first row, and with the help of the snap tool, I move it to the edge of the room. Select both rows and join them together. From the modifiers, I add a bevel modifier to them to break up the sharp edges. I also add an array modifier on the Y-axis to fill up the room with planks. If it's not perfect, you can use this scale trick again with the 3D cursor, but you have to change its position again. I selected this vertex and moved the 3D cursor there with Shift S. Change the pivot point and start scaling until the planks reach the other wall. I will create the skirting boards now by selecting the walls, then in edit mode I add a new loop cut with Ctrl R. Don't forget to change back the pivot point. Now press S and Z, then press 0 on the keyboard to flatten out this edge loop and move it down like this. I will add in another loop and move it close to the ground. Select these two faces, press Shift D to duplicate them, then press right click to snap them back where they were. Press P and choose Selection. Now we have a separate object. Right-click and select Set Origin, Origin to Geometry. This will help with our next move. Go into Edit mode, select the two faces, press E to extrude, then right-click. After that, press Alt and S twice to scale them along their normals. Don't forget the Apply the Scale. I'm going to copy the bevel modifier from the planks, so select the skirting, then the planks, and in the Modifier tab under Bevel, select Copy to Selected. Let's add in a new cube for the windows. Scale it up just a little bit, or you can make it as big as you want, then create another copy with Shift D, join them together, and apply the scale. Now I'm going to move these boxes through the wall like this, and for the next operation we are going to need an add-on called Bool Tool. Go to File, Preferences, Add-ons, then start typing in Bool Tool into the search bar, and it will pop up quite fast. Make sure to check this box. After this, you can close this window. Select the boxes, then the walls, then press Ctrl and numpad- for the Boolean operation. This will cut out the windows on the walls. The good thing in this is that it's non-destructive, which means you can still able to move the cutters wherever you want. I made a duplicate of the skirting to the ceiling as well. Let's start working on the furnitures. Add in a new cube, then scale it down on the Z-axis like this. Delete these two faces, then apply the scale. I added a new solidify modifier with even thickness, then I applied it. Go into Edit mode, select this face and duplicate it, move it up, press E to extrude and confirm with left click. Then I created another duplicate from the top face just like before, but I moved the front edge back before extruding the face. In this state, you can easily edit the proportions of the armchair if you want. Make it nice and thick to get that stylized look. If you are okay with your armchair, select the cushions with L and separate them from the frame with P selection. In Object mode, add a subdivision modifier to the cushions with Ctrl 1, crank up the levels, then right-click and shade it smooth. Go into Edit mode and add two loop cuts with Ctrl R, then bevel them with Ctrl B to add some more defined shapes. Continue by adding more loop cuts where needed. I also moved some edges around to get more round surfaces. Select the frame and bevel the front edges with a lot of segments. You can add segments with the mouse wheel. Shade is smooth, then in the Object Data Properties enable the Auto Smooth. In the modifiers, I also added a new bevel modifier to break up the sharp edges. For the legs, I added another cube, scaled and moved it like this, applied the scale and copied the bevel modifier from the frame. Then I also added a mirror modifier to the leg, and for the mirrored object I picked the frame and selected both the X and Y axis. You have to fix the frame's origin point because it's not in the middle, therefore the legs are not mirrored correctly. To fix that, select the bottom face of the frame, press Shift S and select Cursor to Selected, then right-click Set Origin, Origin to 3D Cursor. Now the mirror is working correctly. Move the armchair aside because we are going to create the couch. Duplicate it with Shift D, then duplicate the cushions one more, select the frame, and in Edit mode, move all this geometry to the right side like this. We just have to fix the mirror point once again, and it's the same method as it was in the armchair. For the couch, I'm going to add in a new cylinder for a rounded pillow, move it and scale it as you see fit, then I apply the scale and bevel the front and back edge loops with a lot of segments. To make it look a bit better, I inset this face twice, and after the last inset, press M and select Add Center. This will merge that edge loop into a single vertex. I also added a subdivision modifier with 2 levels and shaded it smooth. Let's copy it to the other side. With this done, you can join the cushions into one geometry to make our life a bit easier, then place it somewhere in the room along with the armchair. Now add in a new plane for the blanket and move it over the couch like this. Scale it up and apply the scale, then in edit mode add in a new loop cut to the center of the plane. After that, select both the faces and give it a few subdivision with right click. On the subdivide panel, 10 cuts should be enough. We have to make the couch and also the frame into a collision object in the physics tab, so the blanket will not fly through it when we hit the play animation button. For the plane, I select the cloth option in the physics tab and check the self collision option. Now you can play with the animation, and it can be a few tries before it goes where you want. If you're happy with the blanket, shade it smooth, then add a subdivision modifier along with a solidify modifier. I will create the carpet from a circle with 30 vertices. Let's scale it up and in edit mode, select the bottom vertices and move them down until you get this shape. Select all the geometry with A, then press F to fill it up, then E to extrude the face. Apply the scale, shade it smooth, and add a bevel modifier to make it nice and round. The next object is the table. This was made out from a plane as well. I dissolved one of the vertices with X and then tried to create a triangle shape like this. Now I select all the vertices and bevel them with Ctrl B and V. You can also add more segments with the mouse wheel. As I did at the carpet, I extruded the face to give it some volume, shaded smooth and added a bevel modifier. The legs of the table was made out of a cylinder with 16 vertices. I moved it to one of the corners, made it touch the ground and also scaled it down and beveled it to get this kind of a leg shape. Delete the top face as we don't need it and add a subdivision modifier. Now you can rotate it out a little bit, then create the other 2 legs with Alt and D. The painting and the frame on the wall are made out of a single box, scaled down on the X-axis, then an inset, extrude, followed by another inset and a bevel modifier. It's super simple. So as the lamp in the corner, so I will just fast forward the last object. You should be able to follow this process by now. I also covered the windows with a single plane. Later on I will add an emission shader to this plane to get some lighting out of the windows. I also added a bevel modifier to the walls as well, and after I applied the scale, it worked perfectly. Lastly, I added another plane for the ground and scaled it up so it covers all the area in front of the camera. With all the modeling finished, we can start adding some colors and materials to our scene. I quickly changed the viewport shading to material preview, and I will start with the background. Create a new material in the material tab and copy paste this hex code to the base color, then change the specular value to 0.4 and the roughness to 0.8. I already experimented with the colors before, so I will just type in the hex codes for the base color input. But you can always create different colors if you want. For the walls, I added a new material slot to the object with the plus icon and created a new material in that slot, then changed its color to blue. You have to select all the faces that you want to color, then press Assign on the material. Your homework now will be to color everything in the room as you want, or you can simply check the description for the material values what I used in this scene. For more easier material distribution, select all the objects you want to color the same, then select the object lastly which you want to copy the materials from, then press Ctrl L and select Copy Materials. I hope that you could manage to add the materials to everything. For the plane in the windows, I added a new material, clicked on Principled BSDF and select Emission. Select the lamp, press Shift S and cursor to select it. It's an easy way to add objects where you want. Add the new point light with Shift A, then change its power to 75. Now let's change the viewport shading to rendered and switch the render engine from Eevee to Cycles. I also changed the device to GPU as my graphics card is faster than my CPU. Then I will press Shift and C so the 3D cursor goes back to the center of the scene, which will help us distribute the lights a bit easier in the next step. So let's add in the first area light, scale it up like this, then change its shape to disk. I'm going to change the transform pivot point to 3D cursor. This is why we moved the 3D cursor to the center before. Rotate the light by 45 degrees on the x-axis, then also on the z-axis to get a nice backlight. Let's increase the power of the light to 6500. Move it up a bit more, then I'm going to add a pale blue color to it. With Shift D, I create another copy of the light, then I'm going to rotate it on the Z-axis and also on the X-axis by pressing X twice. With G and Z twice, you can move it along its normal Z-axis. Let's lower the power to 5000 and slightly change the color as well. Let's create another copy of the light and decrease the power a bit more. I also gave a warm orange color to this light. Then add in a new area light, scale it up, increase the power and change its color. Let's rotate the light in a way that it lights from the camera's angle. On the rendering panel, I enabled the freestyle with 0.4 pixel size for those awesome outlines in the final render. I also changed the contrast to high contrast and increased the exposure. Now we are ready to render our image, and it should look something like this. Lastly, navigate to the Compositing tab and click on Use Nodes. Press Shift A and search for the glare node. Drop it between the render and composite nodes. If you Shift Ctrl click on the glare node, you should be able to see how it affects the render. Change it to Fog Glow and use the High preset. This way you can add some bloom effects like you would do it in Eevee by default. So this is the final image we have created. I hope that you managed to follow this tutorial and you get yourself a nice outcome. And of course, if you like this video, leave a like or a comment down below. Don't forget to send me your result in email or on Instagram. I really want to see them. You can also download this blend file and many other works of mine from my Patreon if you want to support me. So thank you all, and I will see you in the next video.